Talk about sport with Beck Brooks. Issues in sport that get us talking. Opinions matter.
Welcome to the show. This is Talk About Sport with me, Beck Brooks. This is the fourth and final podcast in the series. Two very different sports, karate and running. This episode we are focusing on those issues such as the lack of coverage, the legacy of London 2012 and celeb role models. With golf, sevens rugby and kite surfing going to make a debut at Rio 2016, sports such as karate still aren't in the Olympics, and the question is why? I chatted to Charlotte Kent to see why she thinks it isn't in the Olympics and what sort of impact it has not being showcased in front of the world. First off though, I asked Charlotte when did she first get involved in karate.
So I started when I was in year 10 and 11, and it was an out-of-school company came into the school and delivered a development plan of 12 lessons for something different to offer to the PE curriculum. And from that, then we was given the opportunity to join the club, which was local to our school. The local teacher happened to be a national level coach, so the level of teaching we was offered was very good. So that gave us all the platform to then go on to win national awards.
So just with advertising then, it really got yourself, you thought, oh yeah, I'll try and give it a go at karate?
Yeah.
And without that, do you think you would have not really gone for it and gone for more of a popular sport?
Yeah, it just shows, because obviously when you're at school, the sports that are generally, this was obviously from my experience, generally offered were very mainstream in the sense it was netball, football, rugby, but that was generally, if you wanted to compete and play other schools for girls, unless you was interested in netball, there wasn't really that much offered. So karate, when that came along, that was just something different. And if I didn't start it in school, there's no way I would have gone to a class, because obviously when you start something in school, you're with your peers, you're with your friends, kind of gave me the taster for it and the confidence. But without it coming into school, I wouldn't have really thought about it. So
have you carried it on now? You're at York St John, you've been there for 3 years, and you still carried on with it?
Yeah, so coming to university, I went to find the local club, and I'm still competing to a high level. So obviously it has, for me, it's been very beneficial that the school offered it to me.
Are there any issues within karate at the moment? Do you think there's lack of funding or competitions or even role models? Do you think there could be more of all of that?
Definitely. I think obviously because karate, it keeps getting so far into the fight to get into the Olympics, to be an Olympic sport. Due to the politics itself within its sport, that's the reason to why there's so many different clubs and different associations do it with different rules. They've tried it hard to conform to one set of karate rules. They have done it, and there's something called the WKF, which is the World Karate Federation. So now there is global world championships going on. So for karate, that's very good. But I think the thing that definitely lacks within karate is, with it not yet being a big enough sport, it doesn't have the funding. It doesn't have the advertisement. Obviously, you always hear of the local football clubs, and generally these football clubs manage to get more sponsors, local support from the community. Karate seems to be a bit of a standalone sport in the aspect I sometimes think people don't actually really know what it is. Obviously, about 5 years ago now, when the second Karate Kid film came out, that did a lot of justice, the local clubs, because obviously people thought, oh yeah, I'd like to give that a go. But I think a lot of karate is a lot of self-defense and just general flexibility, which is obviously good for people's health. So I think if it was advertised right, I think karate, could go on and it could grow and become a very, very popular sport.
Definitely. And what sort of competitions do you get yourself involved with over the year?
So over the year, there's the national championships and then there's the local championships. So these are when all different clubs, associations and different styles, we come together and then we obviously compete. So you've got kumite, which is like a fighting, sparring aspect. And then you've got the other aspect of karate, which is kata, which is like a sequence of movements, and it's a set sequence. So you'll do a same sequence as somebody else, and then you'll be judged on who has better stances, better posture, who creates more power.
And do you think with all these competitions, is there a lack of media coverage, and do you think that's why it's not such a popular sport compared to football, for example?
Yes, definitely. I mean, when we go to a competition, we will always contact the local presses to come down and take photographs of medals, and we'll always try and get the competitions into the press, but they do not seem to have the same. They do not give us the same attention as if it had been a local football tournament. These things are always covered, and just generally people in the community spread the word, even like down to a local level. The local papers and things are often quite, they would only come to our karate events if we're at them. They don't seem to want to. There doesn't seem to be the interest, obviously, because, like, again, the sport, a lot of people don't really know what it is, but if that could be changed and if there could be a lot more advertisement and a lot more media coverage, then there's no doubt that the sport could grow significantly.
Do you think it was because it didn't make the Olympics in London 2012? Do you think if it was, do you think people would get more involved with karate? Do you think it was a shame that it didn't?
Yes, definitely. And I think for people who are practicing karate themselves, I think if there was a chance of, okay, it's going to the Olympics, I think that would give everybody a big boost, because everybody would obviously, that's ultimately what people do in sport, isn't it? You want to better yourself and you want to compete at the highest level. Obviously, karate not getting into the Olympics was a huge setback, because karate globally did a lot of work, and they did a lot of work actually to try and get themselves in the position to be Olympic sport.
Yeah.
There is no doubt that it could be Olympic sport. I mean, it's done everything. It's uniformed as one now. And the competitors out there, like some of the competitors, like even in our country in England, are absolutely amazing. They strive and work so hard like any other sport, and obviously I think it will be a matter of time, because I think eventually karate will make it.
What does karate need to do to be able to become an Olympic sport? Is it like a set criteria that they're just not getting up to?
I think it's because with karate, it's like many martial arts. There's so many different forms of karate with different rules. There's so many global karate clubs. Like, say, for example, I'm currently a member of JKA, Japanese Karate Association England. So they have clubs all over the world, but as do every other denomination and style of karate. So until they kind of come together more as a unified, just one massive style, it's hard to get karate into the Olympics, because there's so many. It's which rule system would they use from which style, and obviously that would create problems because there's so many big styles doing different things. So I think that is what's holding it back currently. The WKF has, tried to combat that problem, and they are now a very big style, and they hold massive world championships. But there's still too many other styles and associations doing that themselves as well. So I think it's more a matter of time waiting for them to unify them as one.
Can anyone get involved in karate, or do you need a bit of experience to then go to find a local club, or can you just be a beginner?
Yeah, all local clubs, they all want the beginners down. Obviously it's good for the club to grow, and you rely on people starting up all the time. The one beneficial factor with karate that I just think is really good, for positive for male and female, is that when you start you do not have to be athletic. So literally, I think this country, obviously we're always saying that people are need to lose weight, people need to get fitter. Karate does offer that, because you start and you build your own level. So it's not like joining the football team when if you're not good, you're not going to be on the team, so you're probably not going to benefit from the sport. Karate is obviously, you're all kind of in a sense, you're on your own journey. Every session you want to better yourself. So you work on your own fitness levels, you work on your own flexibility levels. And by doing that, generally, obviously, you get healthier, you get fitter, you get more flexible. So I think karate could combat so many problems in this country. And I think with the right advertisement, and if somebody was to really push for it, and it was to get the press coverage of all the beneficial factors, then I think karate would just grow, yeah.
So do you think with all those elements, do you think there's a strong future for karate?
Yeah, definitely. I think something it is lacking is definitely the advertisement. I think you don't hear about it, and I think sometimes it's one of those sports that people know of, but you don't really know that it's going on. And people do need to know that in most local communities there is a karate club, and people should feel free to go join, have a look and see if it's for them.
Talk About Sport podcast with Beck Brooks. Opinions matter.
The second focus in this podcast is running. Peter Brooks, a keen runner from 14, used to run once a week with his dad, and now is involved with many running competitions. I began with asking him, when did he start running competitively?
More in the year just before I went to university, when I was in up six, I started to realise that I enjoyed it a lot more, and training was sort of easier to do in the week a lot more. So yeah, I started to enjoy it a lot more and found that racing a lot more was good fun. Yeah.
And do you think there's the same, like male and females both take part in running, or do you think it's dominated by one sex at the moment, or do you think it's pretty evenly split?
I think it's getting more even these days, but I think it still is sort of more male dominated. Like, I did the national cross country championships at the weekend, like in the senior women's race there was about 700 women racing, but in the senior men's race there was about 1,700 men racing, so sort of shows a bit of a sway towards the men at the moment still, but it gradually is evening out a bit more, I think.
And how are they sort of trying to advertise more to women to get them involved?
I think using sort of celebrities such as Jeff Ennis and particularly young athletes like Jess Judd, sort of showing their progression, particularly it kind of inspires girls at sort of younger level, like under 11s, under 13s, and hopefully sort of they can be brought through the system, through coaching and stuff, right through to the top end of major competition.
And what sort of level are you competing at the moment?
Anything from sort of local races through to national level. So I'll do stuff like local 10Ks right through to races such as the National Cross Country Championships or National Road Relays and stuff like that. So yeah, sort of mostly national at the moment.
Is there any other issues within running, like funding or lack of clubs and competition?
I think there is an element of, I don't know, I think there has to be a mutual respect which is sometimes lost between runners at the moment, and I think that kind of needs to be built up a bit more, because you do get quite a lot of, there's good competition, there's bad competition. I think at the moment there's a bit too much sort of angst between clubs or runners, and it builds up over time. I think it kind of needs to be brought back to an enjoyment of the sport rather than enjoyment of beating other people primarily. So it needs to come back to the base of the sport, really, of just going out to run and run the best time you can, really.
And what's the park run that's been introduced?
Parkrun is a weekly timed 5k run at parks around the country, which is free of charge. And runners, when they sign up, they're allocated a unique barcode which they take to the run. And then once they cross the line, their barcode is scanned along with another barcode which they receive, which shows their position. And then results are generated which shows their time, their position, and other stuff such as age grading, which allows you to compare two runners of completely different age groups. But through this percentage, you can see how they would compare if they're on the same level. Have
you been pleased with the results that you've got from your park runs that you've been involved with?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've been doing them since December 2011. That was sort of the first stepping stone in sort of turning competitive, because I did my first one, and I did not a sort of quick time, but it was a much quicker time than I thought I could do, and I thought if I work at this a bit more I can definitely get quicker. And within a few months I'd already knocked off about 2-3 minutes off my time, and from there I went on to join my club, and yeah, it was definitely a helpful tool in establishing where I am now.
And who runs Parkrun? Is it a national organisation?
It was established by a runner called Paul Simpson Hewitt down at Bushy Park in London, and it's become sort of, I'm not sure if it's a registered charity at the moment, but it's an organisation that doesn't charge for anything at all, and they run events around the country, and there's separate local teams at each run, which basically sort of run everything.
And what sort of impact do you think Parkrun has had on running at the moment?
I think it's definitely inspired many more people to take up running and to get into running and keep fit. For instance, Huddersfield Parkrun, when that was first started up, there was about 100 runners each week, more or less, which for a parkrun is quite good for when it first starts up. But in the last few weeks, about just under 3 years on from when it started, there's in excess of 600 runners some weeks. And so it's definitely shown there's been a definite sort of increase in the number of people who take up running and who enjoy it, so they turn up each week to.
And what sort of opportunities do you think the parkrun offers to like competitors like you? Is it a good way to like socialise and meet people from different clubs?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was looking to join a club, it meant that I could sort of talk to runners from all clubs, particularly down in Birmingham. But also when I came up to university, I went to parkrun the first week I came up here, And I met a couple of people from the club I'm at now, and they were saying, "No, you should come down, just come and try it out." And so it was definitely that was one thing that definitely helped. And it means that on a Saturday morning, you just go up there, 9 o'clock, and get a run done in the morning. You can do it at whatever speed you want, so I can use it to simulate a race if I want to, or I can try out different race tactics, or I can just go up and just have a nice, easy stroll around the park, really.
And I've seen that you've been publishing Athletes Weekly. What was that for?
That was a letter that I sent in regarding Parkrun and how there is a sense of sort of almost snobbery about some senior members of some clubs who think that Parkrun might be detrimental to sort of clubs and athletics in general because it might decrease membership at clubs, when actually I think it's more beneficial to clubs because it will inspire more people to realise their potential and they can actually go on to join the club. So it was basically a letter saying that it almost embodied the ethos of the Olympics in 2012, which was inspire a generation by having sort of all runners of all races, religions, ages, all in one place, just running at the same time.
So when you sent that in, did they understand your opinion of where you were coming from?
Oh, definitely, yeah. They definitely agreed to it. And there's been a lot of, recently in the last few weeks, there's been loads of letters being sent in about Parkrun too, and there was one which said about club membership being reduced, but it was talking about one case study of one club, when there was many other people writing in response to this one letter that this person had sent, saying that their clubs had actually benefited greatly from it, and that it was actually a really positive tool.
And then looking at London 2012 Olympics, do you think running has become more popular with everyone seeing it on the big show on TV?
Oh, definitely. I think with athletes such as Bolt or Farah or Rhodesia, I think running in general across all disciplines, whether it be sprinting or middle distance or long distance, I think it's definitely benefited, not only from a sort of taking part, but also spectating. It's definitely benefited because now when you go to events such as sort of Diamond League events or even just local championships, there's a lot more in the way of spectators turning up, and tickets are selling out ridiculously quickly. So, for example, Commonwealth Games, the athletics tickets for that will sell out really quickly, and I think that has partly stemmed from the impacts of the Olympics.
And do you think athletes such as Jessica Ennis it's been a really good role model for women to try and get involved with such sports as running?
Yeah, definitely. I think by her, they used it almost as a poster girl for the Olympics, which some people saw as a bad thing. But I think it was definitely a good thing because it meant that it showed that it was no longer just dominated by male athletes, that the women are just as talented, just as important really, and they actually can be much more interesting to watch than the men's, because men's racing sometimes can just be a bit too tactical, whereas women racing, such as heptathlon particularly, is really interesting to watch because so many different disciplines, and that's actually a good sport for young girls to be inspired by because there's so many different sports within one event they can take up and take part in.
Yeah, definitely, and it's good for even young girls to see other role models rather than those celebrities that they see and actually get bad role models from them.
Oh, definitely. I think athletes in particular, because they're not you've got footballers who are there's much more of a celebrity status about other sports like football or rugby, whereas athletics, I think you do have celebrities like Farah or Bolt or Ennis, but essentially they're only on the same level as other athletes.
And do you think there's enough media coverage through radio or television or print?
I think in terms of media coverage on the TV, I think that ever since the Olympics, they've definitely increased it a lot more. It's been really good to see how much they've covered it. The radio, the same thing. In terms of written journalism, such as newspapers and like the BBC website, there's not enough, I don't think, coverage. There's only sort of the occasional allusion to it. Like there's pages and pages of sort of what people might think of popular sports, such as rugby and football, which is understandable because that's every week. But I think athletics needs to have similar focus because that will then lead to helping inspire other people to take part by reading about it a lot more.
Coverage of sport, particularly women's, is an issue that keeps cropping up, especially after today's discussion on karate and running. Will this improve in the future? And will karate ever make it in the Olympics? Only time will tell. This has been another edition of Talk About Sport with me, Beck Brooks.
Talk About Sport with Beck Brooks. Issues in sport that get us talking. Opinions matter.